these innovative projects, and at present they have a special character and they're related to the medical technical sphere. And so some knowledge grows through the scientific basis in different medical spheres. And then innovative products spring up that medical doctors use in day-to-day practice for prevention, for treatment, for recuperation, and for setting the diagnosis for different diseases. We have been talking and mentioning also Kurchatov Center projects on natural technologies. So for the fifth and sixth technological tiers, these are nano, bio, infracognitive projects. And systemic theory is needed in order to develop these products. Let's say we have products and we have knowledge of nanotechnologies, of biotechnologies, of IT, of cognitive technologies. And in order to design such products, it's necessary to have systemic approach where there should be an integrator. And we thought that a new type of medical research would be the integrator that could unite this interdisciplinary knowledge. We understand that a cluster is a complicated system, and we need to think about systemic theory that would help us to design such clusters. We cannot ignore that such a theory must be created. So in our medical and biological cluster, we decided to think over our experience. So we decided to propose the systemic theory for creating clusters. What kinds of principles effective medical innovative clusters should comply with in order to have good results. So there are 4 levels, from innovative products to mega clusters, and at each level we run into situations that clusters have 2 subsystems: a functional subsystem and provision subsystem. Functional system is a process of implementation of innovative products, and provision is infrastructure for providing functional processes. So we demonstrated the pictures at previous forums, and if we present innovative activities, this is a complex systemic activities where there are 3 phases: creating a prototype, creating a smaller series, and creating en masse production. You cannot mix these levels because each of these stages has its distinct structure. And in the part of the provision infrastructure, we related the engineering centers, prototyping centers, industrial parks, competence centers, complex technoparks, various services. And then altogether, it demonstrated that this is a complicated system, a complex structure, and it is necessary to have some clear theoretical foundations for developing such systems. From our point of view, the key problem of all innovative medical biological clusters and clusters in general is that the main systemic principle is violated. This is a principle of setting the goal and the process of systemic integrator and of first-person approach. So the principle of systemic integrator requires that for a cluster of different clusters, it is necessary to know who is interested in creating clusters. Does he understand all the systemic organization of processes? And if there are clear ways of integrating, then we know that there are 2 players in clusters: state and private business. So if we talk about the implementation of cluster policy in the Russian Federation, it is necessary to consider high tempo of economic growth, diversification of economy due to providers of equipment, scientific organizations that form territorial complexes. We demonstrated achievement of these goals for creating high-tech medicine, in increasing the production of products of the fifth and sixth technological tier, making our regions more attractive in terms of investment, then for increasing the tax payments, improving the efficiency of medical organizations, and also any government has social goals, so there should be more high-tech medicine, more services must be provided, the lifespan should be longer and mortality should decrease, and medicine should become more accessible. If we take business that takes part, of course, they're interested first of all in economic indicators, in the growth of profit, higher capitalization of business, higher sustainability of business. And the key point in realizing the achievement of the goal is a balance between two subjects and economic and social goals. For example, if we look at our technopark, this is quite achievable, it's feasible. So we have already talked about the principles that were formulated within the frameworks of this theory that were developed under the guidance of Ekaterina Mamonova, the director of our medical technopark. So the principle of balance of different dimensions in terms of the innovative activities and the infrastructure for it. The state is the initiator of innovative activities and tries to help to create technoparks, business incubators, prototyping center, engineering centers. And often it happens that this is an expensive structure. It doesn't find support from the lacking innovative companies, and when there is this disbalance between these two sides, you wait for trouble because the infrastructure is expensive, it costs money, and we ran into this in our technopark. And if there is no yield from innovative companies in time, then it becomes a large-scale financial problem. So also there should be inclusion of clusters into one common system. I was at a round table here at the Technoprom, and our Tomsk colleagues, who we deeply respect and want to work with them, they were saying what is a cluster in Tomsk, and by our questions that we asked them, we understood that these are the enterprises. Even if you ask them what do you do with in the cluster, how do you interact inside this cluster, what effect do you achieve, and we understand well that they don't have an answer to this. And then a principle of continuous development. So we have been expecting some crisis phenomena, and we needed to precise management systems that would respond flexibly to all of these changes. And we should gain critical mass. And the author of this term, I think, is present here, Evgeny Kutsenko, who formulated this notion for the first time in Russia. Because when there is a certain number of participants for functional systems, then there is a positive effect. So we know that in our Technopark and at Technoprom we talked on what is a critical mass. But this principle should guide all of our research. And we should also overcome barriers in some material sphere. I myself I'm from different realm of research, but I understand that we need to join forces with Novosibirsk and Tomsk partners, and only jointly we can say what particular steps can be done.
Another principle I'd like to mention, I decided not to write about it. This is the principle of maximum reasonable typization. The cluster allows us an opportunity to unite the companies with different terms of obtaining the effect. First, the projects of import substitution with quick payback. But the most breakthrough projects the President mentioned and the Akademgorodok 2.0 require long-term perspectives. So uniting different types of projects, we allow the first projects at the first stage to offer support to long-term projects. And when the long-term projects begin to earn money, they will have to return the money to the first projects. Thus, we'd like to indicate this subject. We are ready to share our results, and we invite you to come to our stall. So this is what we'd like to underline. Thank you. If we have questions, then we can ask them when the next speaker speaks. The next speaker is. Good afternoon. I did not expect such a large audience. That means that the cluster policy yields interesting results, and many people are interested in its development. Or maybe there are many people who feel our problems of the cluster policy. I'd like to speak about the part of normative regulation as a result of a certain type of cluster. I will be brief because there will be other speakers speaking about the application form regarding the technological support in innovative health care, regulation of the circulation of medical products is done in according to the federal law number 329. So the regulative legislation determines the circulation of medical products in the market. Then there is a decree of the government that describes certain procedures and spheres of circulation. Altogether, in this sphere of circulation, there are more than 20 normative acts. The main agency that controls the circulation is Roskomnadzor. In the next presentation, you will hear about the other aspect of the circulation of medical products. To implement this function, there are administrative regulations of Roszdravnadzor for providing services in the area of circulation of medical products. And in order to carry out different activities, different permits should be obtained. Circulation of medical products is a licensed activity in our country. Roszdravnadzor provides a permit to import these products into Russia. And also the business owners should notify that they are starting this activity regarding also including the medical services if you are a medical organization. At the same time, regarding some socially significant medical products, the government controls the prices in the range of 15–70%. There is a list of such products and the ceiling prices. For the medical products, in there are tax preferences. These are tax deduction or tax exemption as 10%. The details of selling medical products are determined by the general rules for selling products, certain goods that were introduced in 1998, which are part of the Consumer Right Protection Law. In accordance with the existing laws, the Criminal Code, the Administrative Code, and the administrative assigns the executive functions to Roszdravnadzor. Speaking about the novelties, there will be a presentation available at the organizer's website, and you will be able to read the regulatory acts, the innovations, and so amendments were made in the Criminal Code of the Russian Federation in the part of establishing the state duty in registration for medical products. Besides, the action of the registration certificates was extended. Amendments were made in Roszdravnadzor, in the rules of state registration of medical products, and they were brought in agreement with the Criminal Code. An additional provision was introduced regarding the Federal Service Roszdravnadzor in regarding registration of the medical products in accordance with the European Commission requirements. And the decree of the Russian government was issued, which enumerates the medical products and with the provided list of those products which are not subject to government regulation, with the prices. Changes were made in the list of the medical products, the sale of which and the import are not subject to taxation. That's the decree 242. In particular, legalization of the right of circulation in accordance with the medical products in accordance with the registration certificate. And the last amendment was passed by the Russian government on the 31st of May, changing in the rules of state registration. They were prepared for a long time, but they introduced many norms which were expected by the participants of this market, including simplification of the procedure of registration, of the medical equipment, of the diagnostic equipment. So the terms of registration were specified, considering the changes in this area, without considering these changes. So all the details were listed, which allow the participants of the market to go through the registration procedure on time. And the Ministry of Health is preparing and issues decrees regulating the circulation of medical product, like a standard contract, requirements for keeping the technical documentation, keeping the administrative regulations of Roszdravnadzor. Changes are made in the provision on the working group regarding the circulation of pharmaceuticals and medical products. This work group was assigned the function of developing the area of circulation of medical products when stakeholders' appeals are considered. I will not enumerate all the decrees of the government. We'll just look through them. One thing I'd like to mention is that in 2017, Roszdravnadzor issued a decree on approving the order of on consulting related to the procedures of state registration of medical products. More than 60 companies have entered this type of consultations, which helped them to pass through the state registration with less time mistakes, because the most mistakes which were made regarding registration were related to imprecision of documents submitted for certain medical activities. The statistics of state registration is shown here. Compared to 2017, 7% more medical products produced in Russia were registered, which suggests activation of the domestic developers of medical products. This trend is being observed this year. We hope that the measures of state support will allow us to increase the share of domestic medical products on the Russian market. Currently, a project of the federal law has been submitted on changes in the federal law on the health care of citizens of Russia, in which there are many innovations. But in terms of the regulatory regulation, it has been waited for a long time. There were many agreements, many consultations and discussions. It was brought together in agreement with the requirements of the European Union. This implies cancellation of licensing of medical products and replacement it with audit of quality. It is allowed to circulate the medical products within 90 days since the moment of submittal. So that makes the life of medical products producers easier. Speaking about the high-tech medical products, a bill has been prepared to introduce changes into the federal law 321 in terms of adding and making and introducing new names in the registration of medical products. The powers of the officers of Roszdravnadzor have been completed within the framework of the European Union. Changes have been introduced in the order of and in the activity of Roszdravnadzor. We can notify not only the central Roszdravnadzor agencies but the local agencies. The common actualization of the medical products is being done. Proposals are considered of medical organizations and the external specialists on introducing into the second list of imported medical products, so disposable materials and insulin pumps. This question has not been solved yet, and it is yet still the matter of discussion in the subjects of the Federation. We'll try to appeal to the Ministry of Finance, trying to obtain financing of these medical products. This list is being completed. Typical requirements are also being detailed in terms of bringing them into agreement with the requirements of the European Union, and so on. I'd like to speak about the practical application, because clusters and cluster producers implement their ideas into medical products, which are used in providing help to people. The definition of the technological help is given in the federal law. It's a specialized medical assistance. the Decree 1492 on the provision of medical guarantees for the years 2019 and 2020, just as the previous decree state two divisions on provision of high-tech medical assistance, including into the basic program and not included. As rates are formed, there are no limitations on acquiring medical products in terms of the sum. If a medical organization is provided medical products by subsidies, subventions on the territorial programs or by the insurance reserve, in providing this kind of medical assistance, in providing medical products to medical organizations, there are no such limitations. It has to be mentioned that the number of methods of treatment has not increased since 2014, but the number of methods including into the basic system of the obligatory medical insurance has increased. That means that we are transferring to the insurance medicine. Thus, in 2018, we added the new methods. You can see them. More than 1,000 medical organizations are providing high-tech medical assistance. These are mostly organizations located in the subjects of the Russian Federation. The growth of funding in providing high-tech medical assistance is increasing. We are planning it to be more than 218 billion rubles. I am saying like approximately because the means of the obligatory medical insurance are varying, and we expect the sum to be more than 280 billion. More than 1 million people have been offered this high-tech medical assistance. The plan for this year is about the same figure, which suggests generally the satisfaction of the people and the medical organization with the opportunities and the possibilities of providing medical assistance. Speaking about the breakthrough of the federal regions, districts is shown in this slide. And then I would like to speak about innovative medical care and what are innovative medical products. As Prime Minister Medvedev said, we should create conditions that should be used by practical medicine. We believe that all the products are created for this purpose, both by clusters and producers and developers. What is medical science today? We believe here is the cross-section since 1940, how the medical science developed and the stages of its development. We believe that in the nearest 20 years, it is possible that there will be breakthroughs in such treatment of such diseases as myocardial infarction, insulin-dependent diabetes, dysfunction of the organs. Already now, the medical health care creates the prerequisites for extending the lifespan by 30 years. The strategy of development of the Russian science provides the areas for development of medicine. Some platforms and 14 scientific platforms have been determined in accordance with the strategy of development of the medical science, which are being implemented with the respective commissions and decrees of the Russian president and is supported by the federal legislation. we see that further on, development of medicine will continue under the function of correcting the existing from treatment of the existing disease to correcting the genetics of the person, which will ensure longer activity and longer lives of our people. We believe that in this aspect, science should approach medicine from the practical point of view, from the practical view of implementation of scientific achievements and search for growth points, and considering the needs of the medical health care. In the nearest 5-10 years, we believe that acceleration of the innovative chain should and must, based on according to the general causes of should increase by 3-5 times. We believe that the fundamental medical research, as mentioned previously, should be related to development of new methods of prevention and diagnostics and treatment, as well as rehabilitation. We are interested in developing fundamental research as drivers for development of modern medicine. We believe that the importance of the government order for practical research in the area of applied medicine is a necessary condition for the existence of such clusters. Clusters are not only productive but also scientific and educational, highly technological and clinical groups uniting different organizations in order to implement the long-term goal. I prepared one presentation, but actually I'm sorry that it's a long presentation, but it's really related to the cluster policy, to implementation of the technological development. Anyway, I'm coming to the end. In the framework of developing the cancer treatment, prospective scientific treatment will be establishing the molecular mechanisms of the pathogenesis of diseases, searching for animal models, searching for significant and informative biomarkers, personalization of treatment, that is application of targeted pharmaceuticals, and choice of the optimal treatment schemes. Here you can see the slides that show the perspectives of the technological development, biomedical cellular products, personalized anti-tumor vaccines, which is an innovation of the recent years. The technology is based on the principle of enzyme pro-drug target immunotherapy based on domain antibodies. Targeted delivery means this is how we visualize these areas. The perspective industrial directions. We believe that in this part it can be nuclear medicine and radiation medicine as the global directions of development, restorative surgery, regenerative medicine, bioinformatics, and IT technologies. We believe the development and introduction of new innovative technologies are the necessary process of raising the quality of medical care. The existing organization of medical assistance is shown on the left. We believe that in the nearest future, after making the necessary changes into the requirements for introducing new innovative approaches, considering management of human, financial, and informative resources, it will turn into a symbiosis of both of providing medical care and processing data about the patient, preparation of social workers. This will be an overall approach to a citizen, his or her health, and the communication with the doctor, knowing the person's system. It will allow us to rule out the more difficult, more severe diseases. This is the 4P medicine. That is, now we are facing with like all the problems when people come with undiagnosed diseases. In the future, there won't be such cases because we will use digital systems, sensors, biosensors, and so on. Shown here are the concepts of preventive personalized medicine in accordance with the decree of the Ministry of Health. And finally, I would like to say that development and introduction of new innovative technologies are a necessary process of raising the quality of providing medical assistance to people. The new technologies require complex estimation at the earlier stages of their development, and the choice of new technologies for introducing into practice should be accompanied by the study of the person's health and from the position of effectiveness and safety in considering the social economic effects of their application to rule out the unwanted effects, which should be accompanied by studying such technologies, and that in terms of studying the safety, effectiveness, and safety at the earlier stages of development. Thank you.
Thank you for such an extensive report, and I would like the speakers to keep to the timetable. I would like to give the floor to Olga Anatolievna, who would talk about the system of medical items turnover and on the Russian Institute of Medical Technology. It is much simpler for me to speak after Konstantin Binko, after his report. So let me say the following. I'm going to dwell on a few points. So the registration of medical items, according to the decree of the government 1416, is quite different. It's a kind of a line that separates us from the previous systems. And as Mr. Binko said, our legislation has been changing significantly and developing, and we are harmonizing it with Eurasian documents. I would like to dwell on the questions of the use and turnover of medical items from the position of our experience related to state inspection and control. So there are lists of documents and normative acts that have been enumerated, and some of them have not been. So who are controlling this legal entities, individual entrepreneurs, and authorized representatives who are conducting activities related to the use of medical items. So in relation to what events are control events carried out, you need to pay attention that we are talking about the whole sphere of the use of medical items, whether you are conducting technical trials, toxicological trials, clinical trials, and the production, sales, tuning, repair, utilization. So everyone in this room who are interested in medical items, so these are all of these organizations are under state control. Our institute has been providing medical control, and rather many of the nuances have been discovered, which demonstrate that up to now our producers and foreign producers are actively developing production medical items, and they are not following up the medical items, and they are working in the legal field. I wouldn't say they're totally irresponsible, but they don't control the registration dossiers, and that they have already replaced medical items. They don't conduct the necessary trials, don't go to the Russian Supervision Commission. And then there are problems I'm going to talk about, and the Russian Health Supervision can go to court against the violators from the 1st of January of this year. Since the 23rd of January of 2015, the law number 532 came into force, and there were changes in the criminal code of the Russian Federation, which provides for responsibility in the sphere of violating law in the sphere of using medical items. And all of the subjects who use medical items are becoming more careful about their documents and are trying to correct the nuances that have been inappropriate. And I think that those present in this room know who are fined and for what violations. And so a lot of things are described here. So what is Ross Health Supervision is doing? So its sections are described in here, but I'm going to just pick through this because I think if you're interested, you will be able to get this presentation. I would like to dwell on this document where all of the figures are provided. This is the order of this year about the establishment of departmental program for integrated prevention of risks related to keeping valuables illegally. And these are the figures that are related to the work of Russian Health Supervision Commission in relation to medical items and their use. And if we look at all the checks related to technical and clinical trials, they were carried out by employees of our institute. So these are the concise figures. And here what we discover. So producers of medical items. So what's characteristic of different subjects? So this is production and sales of low quality products. And typically, these poor quality products are related not just to poor quality items, but that the markings and branding that is used does not comply with the markings developed by the producer itself. And then there is harder to identify this item and to use it. And then the result, the instruction to this medical device or item is issued for some other device. So all of these mix-ups happen. The next is producing unregistered medical items. You need to note that if you change the design and you widen the functions, then this comes out to be an unregistered item. and there is a criminal punishment for these unregistered items. So this production of medical items and not related to the use documentation. If it is related to domestic producers, so for example, the item might not comply with its own technical specifications. Maybe some new items have been produced and it is innovated, but the technical specifications were not rewritten and not reconciled. And so then there are problems with the control of quality at production. And they actually create wonderful devices, but in accordance with documentation, there should be compliance and reconciliation between the items and the documents accompanying them. And you need to control this situation because the effects of violations is enormous, where our domestic producers just changed the dye, and as a result, the injectors were without any marking. You cannot see how many millimeters, and these are health risks if we cannot control the number of millimeters, especially if we are talking about insulin-related diseases, or this is producing items without a license for doing so. And I think in the future there will not be any licenses, but there will be just supervision and inspection of quality. But at present, the medical items that need to be technically serviced, they definitely must be licensed. And another important point, when the grounds are changed, these changes are not introduced. Not that you're changing the name of your facilities, but this all has to be confirmed by technical trials in order to check whether this medical item is safe for use. If we talk about the suppliers of medical items, they know very well what documents they must deliver accompanying an item, but they deliver unregistered, low-quality medical items. There are frequent cases when, together with one item, they produce a registration certificate for another item, and so they are confusing the buyer. And the buyers are typically legal entities and medical organizations, and then there is a whole long chain because budget money is used for this. So responsibilities that exist is very, very high. And responsibility for implementation of unregistered goods can be shared by producer and the supplier of this item. So then violations and markings, so a person who is supplying or an organization that is supplying should check then an instruction to medical item should be in Russian language. There should be authentic, valid information that the supplier is obligated to provide for the user. Or untrue information about the decisions of the Russian supervision. This is like own interpretation, where the Russian Health Supervision Commission discovers poor quality medical items, and they write information letters on the website of the Supervision Commission, and immediately the supplier says this is not so, we have wonderful products, or some others are writing letters and describe what is forbidden, because the decision of the Russian Health Supervision should be argued with in a legal way, and so then they are confusing the users of medical items. Or not communicating to territorial bodies of Russian Health Supervision Commission about the faulty devices and items. There is a tradition that if someone is working with a specific supplier, then the supplier is communicated that the products are of poor quality, the supplier is replacing the products, and then information comes to the Russian Health Supervision, and then this might lead to some unfavorable events. but there were no indications to this. So these are the medical organizations. They use unregistered medical items, and there is an important point that it is necessary when goods are accepted, then pharmacies typically doing it, and it is better when a commission is created, when there is a commission on adopted medical items, and it looks for the compliance between the title of a registered medical item and the markings that exists on it can be on a tomograph or any device, and this can be catheters. The title should correspond to the title on the device. So this can be short name, long name, but it should correspond to what is described in registration documents. And so we have medical items that are related to measurement, because controlling bodies check for contracts for technical servicing with the right organizations who have corresponding licenses, preserving medical items when their lifespan has expired. So this approach is preserved, and if it's forbidden, then we say that we preserve it before we utilize it. We as medicines, everything is done very clear, and with medical items it has to be just as clear. There has to be a prohibition area and prohibition period, and you should stop using this. In vitro diagnosis, this becomes more and more complicated to use medical items with the expiration date over, because the medical device doesn't allow you to use it if the lifespan of the goods that you see in the barcode has expired. And if there are no barcodes for medical items, then still these rules work, and when there is a check of medical activities through licensing, you definitely discover such faults with medical items. When you do not communicate to territorial bodies of the Russian Health Supervision about medical items that do not comply to the norms and standards in this sphere, typically our organizations are not well informed about the documents that are in force and that they have to comply with. And so all of these things are discovered when the Russian health supervision works with them. So as for safety of medical items and the problems with this, we have discovered. So first of all, this is incorrect operation of these items, or broken packaging, or the violations in the mode of storing. For example, X-ray machinery, if they are not technically serviced in time, we discover this and we find technical faults where there can be incorrect interpretation of the research data that are obtained with the use of these devices. And the function of these tools in terms of software. For example, there are cases when there's mixing of probes, and there should be corresponding software that is registered. And many people say that laboratory information system should not be registered. No, they should be registered. And what program product is related to medical items and that which is not related. And of course, the violations in sterility of medical items. Last year, we made trials in relation to unfavorable events, and we discovered that when people perished and children perished, when there were nosocomial infections, when non-sterile medical items were used, even though it is written on them that it was sterile. So the quality of sterilization of medical items is controlled by us, and these procedures are going to be reinforced. I think there are not so many in vitro specialists in this audience. We also worked with in vitro. This is a rather complicated item. So we provide trials with medical organizations, and so this interconnected procedure, there are methodological recommendations on these controls, and we check for identification signs and at all medical items, including the chemical substances and reagents. So with the use of control materials, questions related to specificity, they are regulated during registration of medical items. And this maybe we test these items for specificity and for sensitivity. When there is a threat of life for the person, when there's HIV, and in other cases, we should use the trials of medical items for in vitro diagnosis in order to conduct them correctly. We also check the use of reactants. Thank you. You are invited to sign the cooperation agreement with the medical technological cluster for innovative medical collaboration. Our previous reports demonstrated the work of the government in legal regulations, the work of clusters. And you know that the state is interested that there should be created a competitive environment so that a lot of suppliers work in this market so that we hope to decrease the price of the goods that are sold, the medical goods. And so, of course, we want to say thank you to CITO Moscow and to tell about the project of the Minister of the Russian Federation, and those that cooperate with creating the so the previous two reports, so the producers said it is not simple to work in this environment, and it is necessary to check quality, and this is going to give the suppliers, the producers, a chance to replace the medical items because we need to follow the changes. The geometry of produce is changing constantly. So just as international experience demonstrates, so the organization that checks for medical quality gives us a chance to introduce changes. So executive bodies of the state receives the information about these changes. And I would like to start with what is the market of orthopedics and traumatology. And the foundation is the USA that occupies 50% of the market. And I express the point of view of the Institute for Traumatology and Orthopedic Surgery. So here there is a small market, but the ministry, without the orientation to export production, it was impossible to work with those orthopedic products. And we understand that we need to become a part of international production chain, otherwise our projects are not as useful as needed. And so the enterprises in the world do not produce these items independently and do all processes within their own country. So this is a process connected to the market. We need to decrease expenditure, we need to diversify, production, the country risks or technological risks. And when we produce products for export, we need to say a few words about products that we present. There is this whole spectrum of orthopedy and traumatology, so working with joints, spinal systems, synthesis, for also metallic parts, for connections. And we need to determine the whole chain. When we look at the companies that produce a whole range of projects, you find just 5 of them, and these 5 occupy most of the market, and 3 companies in the world they are holding 70% of the market. Just 3 companies hold 70%, and in order to compete, because their medical items are sold here, and we have a wonderful medical institution, we need to buy high-tech products, so we buy from these companies. So we need to compete in their environment, and we need to comply with their quality requirements, because they need to recognize us as their competitors. And also in user clinical hospitals that gives a chance to understand that your medical device is related to evidence medicine is safe. What is happening in the market? So it depends on the components. If you look at Russia, it doesn't use the whole chain of production in terms of orthopedy and traumatology. So everyone takes spare parts abroad, and most of the components abroad, and the cycle of production for items is about 7 years. Over 7 years, there is a change, new technologies arrive that allow to enter the market with the new items. And we see today that the competition in terms of the price range, it's almost non-existent, because the minimal price for medical item was in such an amount that for 15,000 rubles you can buy and prosthesis for joint. And if you look at the cost of medical item, you cannot talk about added cost. So we are talking only about added innovative products, and you need to register the product and go through all stages of registration and persuade medical community that it's a useful product. And you need to have international donors. And the producers do not conduct their own research, so these are 2 things: ordering on the side, and also buying and selling startups. It is absent in Russia, but I think this is the main donor of industry. This is what is related to clusters, what is related to the centers of competence, because there's no possibility in the producer to produce items. There is no competence, and he should not be doing this. He should believe to a startup and put money in there, and then calculate the volume of production. And in Russia, the culture of contract production and of producing medical devices is absent. It's hard for us to do it en masse with high results and with high quality and appropriate validation of all processes. In medical devices, this is a complicated process, both raw materials and the end products. There are about 300 stages of processing, so that a medical doctor would really find an authentic and sterile product. And so the problems that appear they are related to overcoming these problems is related to success, and the Ministry of Industry and Trade helps to form the full cycle of production. That is what required international validation when there is a contracted production, and you have to gather from the whole world all of the machinery and mechanisms that would help us to produce innovative products, because now we cannot surprise anyone with these technologies.
Formation IP. Without it, we cannot ensure competitiveness of our production. Here, we collect all the companies that have their own IP. We invite them here so that we could ensure production of the medical items they offer. And accordingly, there are 3 or 4 companies which have selected, which are international contract producers. We want them to be our partners in production. It's very important to have the possibility of export potential, to have a partner who already is producing in other the medical items in other companies. I mentioned the educational activity too. It's innovative activity in terms of startups activity. And in speaking about legislation and clinical trials of the medical items, here I'd like to dwell upon this because this notion has several meanings, and an accelerator is in terms of the industry is the challenge we have, which we have created for ourselves. What I said, the success factors. These are the presence of the foreign partners who have come to our production, with whom we have created partnership relations, and with whom we are developing all the technological processes to create new medical items. For example, there are different aspects of viewing the medical items, like sports medicine, other kinds of medicine. We have to collect them all together, and accordingly, regarding the intellectual donors of the industry, these are Russian universities and international universities. We hope to open a center for preparation of international experts in the area of medical equipment. We have such an agreement with the Ministry of Health. We want to try and introduce the preparation of such specialists. We have an agreement with Skolkovo to prepare specialists and medical managers. And besides, those 2 instruments of support that there exist now, for development of new medical items, is studying the possibilities of participating in the contests, in the list of the requirements which are produced for the Russian manufacturers. I hope that there will be a special decree for prosthesis. And speaking about the future, what has to be done now, the Russian manufacturers should unite to form, together with the Ministry of Health and Roszdravnadzor, a register of medical implants. That's very important, because without proof supported medicine, it's not. We cannot prove that our medical item is safe and can be used in other countries. This is not an easy issue, and the Ministry of Health has approached this without any particular success. But I hope that now we'll be able to develop evidence-based medicine because we have been using safe implants for 10 years already. This is a register of materials for us to create our own production. We must list the materials used. We must allow the producers, as they register their materials, they get registered, they get certain tax preferences. We must create such a library. This will allow us to stimulate the producers on the one hand because they will know what material and which methods of production exist. They must know the measures of safety because we buy certain semi-finished products which should have the certain qualities. The methods of diagnostics that exist do not allow us to say that this is exactly the material on which the studies were conducted, including mass spectral analysis and so on. This is also necessary. It's also necessary to convince the Ministry of Finance, the government of the Russian Federation, that these items are used by government organizations, and now they are in a competitive environment. We buy all the semi-finished products in Russia with VAT, and we sell them without VAT, while our competitors import their items without VAT. So they get tax preferences. This is what has to be done. This will allow us, with all the challenges we are facing, to create a possibility of the growth of competition of the medical items in the area of traumatology. 45-50% of the tasks, implementation abilities, how we can feel safe. We will never feel safer than that because innovations account only for 45-50% in the of the safety criteria to ensure production of medical items in the Russian Federation. That means creating competitive environment both in Russia and abroad. We have registered 5 or 6 items beyond Russia in the marginal market. There are certain difficulties in terms of the absence of a system of certified laboratories on testing medical items that can be shown in other countries. We pay huge money on further trials that have already been done because we do not have such certified laboratories. And besides, this will allow us to ensure the market conditions for the project, its popularity, and we'll hope we'll see the results in the future. Thank you, Viktor Semyonovich. We have 12 minutes and 2 presentations about the innovative materials and new materials and nuclear medicine. Please divide this time into like 6 minutes for each. So the first presentation will be about new materials, one of the key directions of the new innovative medical cluster, the Institute of the Physics of Durability of Materials. That's right. In the presentation is right. I'll try to keep within these 6 minutes. You can see new materials as one of the key directions of innovative medical technological clusters, personalized implants from ceramic composites. I'll give you this example and illustrate it. There are 2 organizations, Institute of Physics of Materials Durability and Tomsk Polytechnical University. In fact, it was practically impossible to do without our colleagues. This is the Cancer Research Center of Tomsk. And the Novosibirsk Medical Technopark. Why? First of all, as the Institute of Durability of Materials deals with materials, the Tomsk State University mostly deals with education and attraction of young graduates. I can say that 3 years ago we developed a special program of master students preparation on biomechanical composites aimed at education in this area. Without obtaining fundamental knowledge in the framework of a classical university, the perspectives, such studies would not have any perspective. As for our medical colleagues, of course, we, as a university or academic institution, do not have any special competitions regarding surgery, yet the success that has already been achieved. We are well supported by Evgeny Tsurinovich Tsenzulov, who is, we are very thankful to him for working in this area. And recently we have performed an serious project on the medical subject together with NEVS Ceramics on development of an experimental specimen, prototype of a disc hernial disc. This is a perspective project in terms of medical treatment. This example illustrates that actually we need to create materials needed for concrete applications. Practically, in our work, in our academic institute, we have developed methods of obtaining such materials which have totally different structure. These may be compact materials, may be highly porous materials. You can see 2 examples of highly porous material. And the most importantly, we should aim at these properties of the new material. This is our viewpoint, which is supported by the recent conferences in the West. These are Bioinspirit materials, which try to make Bioinspired materials, which try to create new materials similar to those existing in nature. The black color stands for our porous ceramics, and the white color is the natural material. And this is the porous zirconium ceramics that is creating the possibilities of obtaining such materials, opens up new perspectives of their use in a special way. Then the next thing begins. Clusters were mentioned. We named them consortia. So we created such a consortium, which united several Tomsk organizations to unite all our competences to develop such medical items. First of all, we can see it in the next slide. All this work is moving to in the framework of the technological platform of medicine of the future, which unites all our efforts and competences. And the essence of our work is such. We learn from our medical colleagues, X-ray and tomograms. We restore the missing parts of the bone and prepare the real implant with the help of digital technologies and 3D prototyping. We name it a hybrid technology, which does not imply the selective laser spectral ceramics, because it's very expensive and not the materials can be used. We imply the hybrid technology of 3D prototyping and about metallurgy. Here, with the permission of the surgeons, we demonstrate a real surgery. They have done 6 such surgeries already, where here you can see the ceramic implant we made for patients. This is personalized medicine because there were no such patients, although generally such technology can be standardized if there is such a demand. We can make different variants of our ceramic items. This is for small joints. We've tried to make such items not for operation. We just demonstrate what can be done according to our technologies at the requirement of medical doctors. Parts of the femoral joint which are not screwed in, but just ceramics is screwed onto each other. I'm finishing. There are more other variants of those medical items we can prepare. And my last slide, there you see many different variants of the medical items we can produce. These are demonstrative examples of how unification of competencies of different organizations results in serious success of all in their efforts and innovations. So if such a consortium works, which we may call a cluster, so far it exists like independently, but if it gets certain support, then the success will be even greater. At least many medical doctors, even from the United States, invite us to come. We have a patent, we have a European patent for such products. Vladimir Ivanovich, just a few words about nuclear medicine and the integration projects of the Tomsk Federal Medical Center. Dear colleagues, nuclear medicine is a dynamically developing branch of medicine. 80% of all the radionuclides produced in the world are used by the medicine. Now in Russia the situation is not so good. We can say that we are able to perform only 7.5% of the radionuclide therapy. The situation in radionuclide diagnostics is not so good either. This is related to the scanty assortment of the radionuclide preparations present in the market. Therefore, one of the priority directions in the studies of the Tomsk Medical Center is nuclear medicine and creating new radionuclide preparations. The cooperation of the Tomsk Polytechnical University continues with the other research institutes, so we have all the competences for creating such drugs and introducing them into clinical trials. I wish to thank the Medical Technopark of Novosibirsk, which has provided huge help in acquiring the innovative potential for producing of radionuclide diagnostics. The first drug was Thallium-199, which has a shorter half-life period, and so the radiation load gets decreased. This preparation is very good in cardiology to diagnose coronary ischemia, to determine the indications for bypass surgery. You can see, for example, the defect of perfusion, which is determined at the peak of the load test, and this is the patient with cardiosclerosis which has a stable perfusion defect for whom bypass surgery will not help. The drug has been very good for diagnosing of cancer and for cytostatic lesion of the regional lymph nodes, because the preparation gets accumulated in the lymph nodes. No matter how good Thallium-199 could be, most tests are done with technetium, but the world has faced the molybdenum crisis from which technetium is produced, because molybdenum is produced from very dirty uranium technologies when 10,000 radioactive waste is produced for one useful item of the product. Now in Tomsk we organized the production of technetium generators. Works are being done to produce a waste-free production of technetium based on the production of natural molybdenum. Thus, we will reduce the cost of technetium, which will have a very high technical purity. One of the new directions is obtaining a radionuclide preparation to filtrate the and to make a trap for the cancer cells. Biopsy of the target node is very important. If such a lymph node is not damaged by metastasis, all the other lymph nodes are intact, and we can make such a surgery. But if the sentinel node is damaged, we have to do larger surgery, removing all the lymph nodes. The existing radionuclide preparations, unfortunately, are accumulated in sentinel lymph nodes, only 1-2%, and neither of them is registered in Russia. In the framework of the Federal Pharma 2020 program, we were able to create such a product which is accumulated 5-6 times more actively in the sentinel lymph nodes. Unfortunately, all the surgeries on diagnosing the smaller cancers of the breast, we inject this preparation, we visualize the sentinel lymph nodes, we make a small incision with a gamma probe, we remove this sentinel lymph node, and we decide whether small surgery is required or we'll have to remove all the lymph nodes, which is often accompanied by significant reduction of the life quality. Another direction in our studies is creating of a technetium marked glucose derivative, which we started as bloodless alternatives for desoxyribonucleosis. This is a very good method of diagnosing of cancer. Is very costly. The minimum cost is 50,000 rubles. We started clinical trials of this preparation, and The first trials have shown that the preparation, unlike the previous preparation, is not accumulated in the brain. That creates perspectives for using it for visualizing brain tumors. Besides, the method is very good in visualization of tumors of the breast cancer, and for finding regional metastasis, and the method of visualizing malignant lymphoma. You can see the first two pictures, studies with our preparation, and the lower picture is the study of positron emission tomography. You see that the tumor is visualized. A pathological accumulation of the preparation is visualized. It has already been mentioned like that these drugs are very perspective. We use this method too. This is this method of using theranostics to treat metastatic lesions with a patient with a prostate cancer. It was enough to inject market actinium into prostate-specific medicine when all the metastases were gone. Under this direction, we are creating a preparation to visualize HAF2 new receptors. These hyperexpression of a epidermal growth factor is accompanied by a very bad prognosis. But on the other hand, we have a possibility to use these drugs for this pathology. These are our first clinical trials of this preparation. We can see that the preparation used on the basis of synthetic antibodies is accumulated in pathological hyperexpression, and as it does not get accumulated in the absence of this expression. I will not talk about the radionuclide to visualize neuroendocrine tumors because we are now only doing preclinical trials. Perspective drug is also preparation on the basis of prostate-specific antigen to diagnose the prostate cancer. And to conclude, I want to draw your attention to the fact that we are publishing our materials rather actively. We popularize nuclear medicine. We have published the guidelines on radionuclide diagnostics in Tomsk, and this is a test book for each medical doctor working in the area of nuclear medicine.